we're Team MASSCreative is here. The focus of today is gonna be a training dedicated to the our advocacy week, which is coming up in, seems like mere moments, but we've been planning and getting ready for it for a while. So let us go. Okay, so very briefly, just some rules of engagement. Please mute your mic until you have, we'll have some discussion at the end. We encourage you to write things down. We will share not only this recording, but also the PowerPoint out. So you'll also be able to reference this for notes. And do throughout, keep using the chat. When we get to the discussion section, we will reference that first. Okay, so here we go. What is Creative Sector Advocacy Week, right? So in the past, many of you on this call joined MASSCreative for Advocacy Day, which we did every other year. The last one we did was in 2019, and it was a day where we came together as a community. We celebrated, we learned, we did some trainings in the morning, then we marched across Boston Common and for meetings with decision makers in the State House for the rest of the day. And that was great, and we were able to do a lot through that work. So as we think about the new setting post-COVID, we know a couple of things. We know that there are economic barriers for folks to join, for geographic ones. There are geographic and economic barriers to travel in for a full day in person. We know that lawmakers are meeting with their constituents in lots of different ways, and we know that building community and building solidarity in your own community, in your own sort of geographic area, is so crucial to long-term sustained advocacy work. And that's the work and that we're really in the business of, is how do we think long-term about sustained movement building? Okay, so you'll see, instead of just one day that is strictly about advocacy, we have expanded it out to 5 days. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're really hoping and encouraging you all to ask your decision makers, everyone from a select board member or a school committee member, all the way up to our state legislators, or even if you feel so inclined, members of Congress, to engage, to sit down and have a meeting in district to talk about the things that you care about. You can also do an organizing meeting, which is about bringing together members of the creative community to talk about the things that you are facing right now, and to talk about what solutions make sense for us as a community. And most importantly, what are the stories of impact and value that you can share out and amplify with elected decision makers and with your networks and your communities. We are, on that Wednesday, we are still having a day of celebration, a Creative Sector Day at the State House. That will begin with some light breakfast and networking. Then we will have a formal program. We have the co-chairs of Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development from the legislature joining us. We have some really great co-hosts who are helping us plan that day, including Mass Cultural Council, Mass Humanities, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the Massachusetts Association of Music Educators, did I say Mass Humanities? If I did, I apologize. Arts Boston and the Network of Arts Administrators of Color are all our co-hosts, and you'll hear from folks representing those organizations. We also have Dr. Mary Grant, who is the president of Mass College of Art and Design, the nation's first publicly funded state university for art and culture, for art and creativity. And then throughout the week, it is about online celebration and actions. I think one of our whole sort of the goal here is to say, like, you don't have to wait for one day or even 1 week to advocate. You can advocate all the time, but we're trying to really concentrate and focus a lot of energy during this week to build solidarity, to organize our communities, and to advocate for the things that we need. So, well, why does that matter? It matters a lot because there are a lot of things that are happening in our world and our communities that are demanding the attention of decision makers and are demanding our attention. And taking a week for us as a sector and as a community and as an ecosystem to remind folks and to remind ourselves of the amazing work that we are doing, and the ways that we can continue to grow and advance that work when we have have more resources and support from the state and local government is a really important part of a long-term sustained advocacy effort. So I'm going to just take a brief second, right, to also sort of say, like, why now? Like, why in the beginning of January? Well, this beginning of January kicks off really the last push in the legislative session. We know in Massachusetts we have a 2-year legislative session. It starts January and goes through December of each year. So this is the first month of the second year of the session, and the bulk of the work will happen between now and the end of July. That's when all bills will be reported out of committee, when most bills either have to be voted on and passed, or they will die, or they will end their sort of existence, and we'll have to wait until the next legislative session starts to start working on them again. And we're going to take up the fiscal year 25 budget. So this is a really important moment for us to kick off a lot of energy and advocacy to make sure that our needs and our priorities are considered when during this sort of major decision-making time. And just really quickly, our decision makers, our elected officials, whether they, again, are select board members, school counselors, school committee members, superintendents, mayors, all the way up through our members of Congress and our president, they consider a lot of different inputs when they're making decisions. And so we obviously, there's the media, right? There are personal, things that personally drive them. If any of you had the chance to watch Mayor Wu's State of the City address, she talked about the impact of going, when she was a little girl, in a stroller with her mother to the Chicago Art Institute on a free Friday to see art with her mother. And she teared up talking about that moment with her mother. And that's why for her, she was so proud to announce that that on I believe it's 2 days a month, most of the major art museums and cultural organizations will be free to Boston public school students. So that was like this was a personal connection for her, and she wanted to see that happen for kids in the city of Boston. Decision makers also consider VIPs. They consider experts, field experts, right? If a report comes out that says that we are on the brink of a financial collapse, they're going to pay attention to that. They also pay attention to their colleagues and their coworkers, right? We all do. They pay attention to their donors, right? Which is fine, right? We pay attention to our donors. And then most importantly and primarily, they pay attention to their constituents. And each one of you is a constituent for many elected officials. And so one of the things that MASSCreative that we really believe in is that our work is not about doing all of the advocacy ourselves. Our work is about making sure that you have the resources, you have the information, and you feel confident to talk about the things that matter most with your elected officials, because we know that that is the most powerful way for us to move forward together. So this is one of the reasons why Advocacy Week just makes a huge difference, is it's a real concentrated time for us to direct our focus and our energy towards our elected decision makers. And we're not going to do that in there are lots of ways that you can advocate, and we'll talk about those in a minute. We have a lot of strength together as a united group, and we can do that through a lot of hero campaigns, right? We can talk to our legislators about how good arts and culture makes their district. We don't need to do it through a lot of pressure campaigns right now, right? We're in a good place. We have a lot of wins that we can talk about, and we want to share those wins. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich Lean, who's going to share more about some specific trainings about what you can do.
Thank you, Em. And thank you for explaining that process so well to everyone, because I think, like, when we talk about Advocacy Week, the difference between Advocacy Week and Advocacy Day, like, a lot of folks are wondering, like, how they can get involved. So this is the perfect way to transition to just give you guys a little bit more input on that. So you could go ahead and move on to the next slide for me. Okay, perfect. So some things that you can consider that you can do during Advocacy Week, or even after Advocacy Week, because the advocacy does not stop after Advocacy Week. Like, the important part of this is that, like, this is an opportunity for you to get started and for you to continue throughout the year. So some things you can consider doing is calling a meeting with your legislators. We have some guides to help you do so, to make sure that you reach out to them, that you're not stuck on what to say, and that they can see your passion, they understand why you're reaching out to them, and that they feel compelled to respond to you. Something else you can do is organize a community meeting, a roundtable, or a town hall. You know where you stand on these issues and you know why you're passionate about advocating for the creative sector. It's time to build a coalition and to bring others into that work with you. So organizing a community meeting, a roundtable, or a town hall is a perfect opportunity to build coalition and allies amongst those around you who wants to do the
Recording in
same thing.
progress.
On You are also welcome to join our team and our co-host at the State House on Wednesday, January 24th at 10 a.m. We're going to be there. It is going to be basically what Advocacy Day was intended to be, which is like a day of celebration, showing our strength, showing our vibrancy, and just showing our love for art, with our elected officials and allies who are going to be there. So please join us then. Also tell a friend. Advocacy Week is about how we can amplify our work, how we can come together. So tell a friend, don't just show up alone. Make sure you're showing up with loved ones to support the art, show up with friends to support the art. And then, of course, we didn't leave you all like to yourselves to figure it out. We created a part of our website that is titled Advocacy Week, where there is more guides and resources, and some of them I will be going through now. So Emily, you could go to the next slide for me, so I can give them more. So, as I said before, you can request a meeting with your representative, and there's a simple email to do so. But first, the most important part is figuring out who are your legislators and what you want to say to them. Whether you want to reach out to your state senator, your state representative, your Congress person. We have a directory to do so. Kelsey just dropped the link in the chat, so please make sure that if you want to reach out to them, you find out who they are so you are reaching out to the right person. I strongly believe that Congresswoman Ayanna Presley is my congresswoman, no matter what district I live in. But unfortunately for me, she is not my Congress representative. But no one can tell me anything because that is my congresswoman. But to make sure you are reaching out to the right person, please use that link to reach out to your legislators. Go ahead to the next slide. So, of course, we wrote a simple email that you can use. It's pretty simple. Like I use me, for example. You could reach out with the subject line requesting a meeting to talk about the creative sector, and then you go, "Dear Representative or Senator Warren, I hope this email finds you well and your staff. Always make sure you're including the staffers, as you all know. Like we have a former staffer on our team, and it is very crucial that you make sure you are inclusive of them. They are your allies in the state house. So make sure when you reach out, you are acknowledge them as well, and you are acknowledging them in their hard work. Make sure you introduce yourself. You tell them what district you're currently in. Tell them why you're requesting a meeting. Give a summary of the issue, the bill, and the budget item that you care about. Our website has all of the bills in a brief summary of them for you, so you can copy and paste directly from there. Let them know that which area you are a resident of, and tell them how you think them investing and supporting this issue is going to be beneficial to the creative sector overall. But most importantly, share a personal connection. Like Emily was saying the other night when Mayor Wu shared her story of how her mom took her to the museum on those free Fridays, so to give her exposure to the art and to like share that bonding moment with her, and how that led to her wanting to do the same for like low income families in Boston. That really shifted the like energy in the room. So the more you share your personal story, the more you connect with it, the more these representatives can feel a part of creating that moment with you. So make sure you share that. And then of course in the email with your name and a contact information for you. Something I always do when I request meetings is like sometimes I ask for an upcoming date for them, but sometimes I offer my own availability, because sometimes when you take that initiative, it shows that you mean more business and that they can work around your schedule instead of you having to work around theirs. So the next slide, as I mentioned, you can hold an advocacy meeting, and there's just 4 simple steps that we've created to help you do so. So first, decide on a meeting setting. Does your meeting make more sense to do it virtually or in person? As we know, like it is very it's way more accommodating for more folks to show up virtually, doing which hours you're doing your meeting. Like our Friday meetings could not happen in person, as we have so many people from all over the Commonwealth who are joining us this morning. So for us, it just makes more sense to share this information out with you all virtually. But if you want to do it in an intimate community, make sure you create the opportunity for people to come together in person as well. If it is in person, consider having refreshment, like coffee, baked goods, water. Don't forget to take care of the people that you are asking to join you in this work. Your allies also deserve to feel cared for in the work. So make sure anything you can invest in to make them feel cared for, make them feel included, you do so. Ask yourself if you need people to pre-register. We ask everyone to pre-register for these meetings because we want to have the opportunity to follow up with you all and to continue the work afterward. We don't want you to just come and we don't have no way of connecting with you afterwards. So a really good practice to make sure that you continue your advocacy is prolonged is to ensure that you will have a way of tracking who is in attendance and what and how to get in contact with them afterward. Make sure you choose a day and a time that makes sense for you and your attended audience. For us, we know Friday mornings is like the perfect way to wrap up your week with this meeting with us, because we've seen it work. We know that if we did it on Mondays when everybody's just coming back from the weekend, it might create a little bit more challenge. So make sure you are creating a space and time that makes sense for the audience that you're trying to connect with as well. All right, some other things you can consider: creating a pre-meeting running agenda, making sure that you stay focused on what the focus. Make sure you are staying on topic with the focus of the meeting. Make sure you are inviting the people that you know needs to be in the room, and ask them to bring others that they would consider important to be in the room with you guys. I think the important part of building coalition is like who knows who and who they know and who they know, so that way like you're building more people power. Make sure make sure you are focused on how long you want the meeting to go on for. Time is very precious to us all, so like the more precise you are, the better. Make sure you have opportunity for if you want to do a presentation, that you get everything in on time, and if you want to do a Q&A, make sure like it's focused so that way it doesn't derail. Again, like all of these guides are on our website under resources and guide for Advocacy Week. So as we go through them, just know you will have an opportunity to access them later on, as well as Kelsey is continuing to drop the link on in the chat. Also making sure you are understanding what your takeaways are, so that way that when you know what success look like, and you have a goal that you're working toward. Something else you can do is coordinate the meeting, so that way like you know what was discussed. Make sure you are delegating, so that way everything is not falling on you. It can be extremely stressful when you take on these big tasks and you take on the opportunity to bring community together. So make sure you share responsibility so others are really in the work with you. Make sure that you create time for networking, because one thing that everybody really love is the opportunity to get to know who else is in the space with them afterward. Avoid making it too long, so that way that like people can really feel like they're not just receiving a lot of information, but they don't have ways to digest it. Some other stuff that you can do is utilize the meeting as an opportunity to grow engagement and support, as I mentioned, making sure you're following up. If you need to do a pre-survey, like making sure you are hearing what others in the community are saying that are important for them to that they want to address, and what they want to make sure that they're bringing up during Advocacy Week or after Advocacy Week to continue the movement. Extend your gratitude to those who attend. I think it's always important to make sure you're saying thank you. We can express how grateful we are at Team MASSCreative to be in community with you all as every other Fridays, and to just like see that you all are investing your time to supporting our work. Those of you who reach out to us via email and asking how you can get involved, who shows up to testify. Our work does not happen without you. So we're really grateful for the opportunity to have you all here with us. Don't be afraid to share with your audience what the next moves are. The more you can give, the better, so that way you can keep your community excited and engaged. Another thing you can do is advocating for, like, ensuring that you understand how you advocate for an issue that you're really passionate about. Most of you already know this, but taking the time to research and understanding an issue is crucial. Emily, you could go to the next slide as I continue to explain. Because as you gain knowledge on the issues that you're advocating for, it's also important to understand those who oppose it. I think sometimes the best way to go about like really gaining compassion and a passion for an issue is to understand both sides of the issue. So that way you are able to share out with others and that they can see why you're a part of the work. Sometimes for me personally, I like to share how when I read an opposing view of something, how it builds more coalition power, how I build more coalition power from that, because I'm able to share why those opposing view has make me a supporter. Know your why. As you gain a deeper understanding of the issue, reflect on how it personally connects to you and those around you. What makes you feel empowered to act about this, and why does that make you feel empowered? I think knowing your why is an important part of avoiding burnout. A lot of us who are in this work oftentimes feel like things are moving really slow, but when you have a why and you continue to work toward that why, it makes it feel a little bit better, because you know that like that why doesn't have to be answered today, tomorrow, next week, but like eventually you're going to get there as you pace yourself and you keep yourself grounded in the work. Make a decision and stand strong in your decision and seek ally and support. I keep emphasizing on this because again, like this work does not happen without allies and supporters. Like you are not alone in this work. There are people all around you who are waiting for an opportunity to join you in the work. So make sure you are sharing and you are giving others an opportunity to be in community with you. My favorite part of this is making a plan and getting organized. Now that you've understood the issue and you've built support around it, it's time to make a plan and to advocate. I think it's important to be realistic, but yet remain imaginative. Think about a short-term and a long-term plan, and what short-term and long-term plannings are. What are action steps that you can take immediately or do on your own? Are you facing a long-term campaign where you need additional support? Like Emily was saying earlier, like we are in a place where we don't have to do, we are in a place where we can do hero campaigns, and we don't have to do campaigns where we are applying pressure too much, because we know that we have the listening ears of those around us. So it is a perfect opportunity to make sure that like as we organize, we are organizing intentionally, and we are organizing to build more support and not to turn those who support us away. If you sign up for a long-term Sorry, Emily. I think there was one more bullet point on that. If you sign up for a long-term advocacy campaign, you need a strong networks of allies who are really equally committed to moving this issue forward. So consider building a coalition infrastructure with shared leadership, expected meeting times, and term team goal. So that way, again, like it's about shared responsibility. So you're not taking things on your own, and you are avoiding organizer burnout. And the last step to how you can advocate for an issue that you're really passionate about is to just take action. Don't be afraid to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward and you just go for it. I think the more risks you take, the better. Because the more intentional you are about taking those risks, the better result you will see out of them. So taking action is something that we're always going to encourage you all. Like whether that action is like requesting a meeting and going into that meeting informed and sharing your passion with legislator, or organizing that town hall, or like doing a coffee hour, like whatever that take action look like, organize and do it. Because I think the more people you're able to have show up, the better. And that will show you too, like, and if you make mistakes along the way, that's just an opportunity to learn. So don't be afraid to take action. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey to give you guys some tips and tricks as a former legislator.
Legislative staffer. Thanks, Richleen. Appreciate the slip. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to 2024. I'm going to offer just a few tips and tricks from my perspective as a former legislative staffer in the State House, although I think this would apply to just about any governmental office that you might visit. So if you want to try to meet with your city councilor throughout Advocacy Week, we highly encourage you to do so, and you can still use these tricks while meeting with their staff in City Hall. So just from the top, it's more effective when you visit your elected official's office if you come in with some sort of printed material. So if you are at the State House on January 24th and you are swinging by your state representative or state senator's office, come in with a fact sheet on the creative sector agenda, for example, and write a little note in the upper hand corner with your name and contact information, or personalize it in some way. But it can be helpful to bring in that sort of printed material so that they have it on their desks. If you are planning on visiting your state rep's office, so this is specific to the 24th event at the State House, just know that many of them are in suites with several different state reps' offices, and some of them can feel a little bit like a maze. So if you walk in and you're not totally sure where you're going or where your state representative's office is, anyone in the office can help you. Just let them know who you're looking for, and they will be happy to help guide you. It's slightly less complicated on the state Senate side because they each have their own offices. So hopefully a little bit easier for you to navigate. But the Senate offices are on the East Wing, and most of the House offices, or many of the House offices, are in the West Wing, just as you are creating your own plan for doing your advocacy that day. If you're offered a chance to meet with staff, and again, this is pretty or mainly specific to the 24th event at the State House, but I would say true at any point throughout Advocacy Week, that's great. Definitely seize the opportunity to meet with staff. They will be some of your greatest allies in the State House or truly any other elected official's office. They do a lot of the administrative work and the scheduling, and they're often the ones who are bumping up some of these policy priorities for their bosses because they can't be everywhere all at once. So these elected officials do lean pretty heavily on their staff for support and for assistance. So please, again, if you are offered the opportunity to meet with staff either at the State House, or even if you send an email and want to set up a virtual meeting from your community and that's the person who you are recommended to meet with, that's great. Definitely cultivate those relationships. For the next step, be clear about what you're asking from your elected official. So come into the meeting pretty prepared with some sort of personal statement about this is the issue I care about and why, and this is how it's impacting our community, but here's the solution that I am proposing. And you could then point towards a bill that's already been filed that you think would address the solution. Essentially just give them some sort of actionable item that they can take away from the meeting, but do that without being demanding. As Richleen pointed out earlier, they have a lot to consider and a lot of competing priorities. Give them the space and time to think about why they might want to take up this issue or become a champion on this issue, and then follow up with them and continue the conversation. So see it as an opportunity for relationship building with your elected official or their staff. And then, as Richleen said, so just to reiterate, thank them for their time, express your gratitude for their leadership on arts and culture. If they've co-sponsored bills that will benefit the creative community, or are sponsoring bills, or have otherwise stood in support of the creative community, show them that you appreciate it and encourage them to continue to stand in support of the community. And practice patience. There might be other things going on at the State House, again, specific to the 24th, or if you haven't heard a response email from them or about your request to meet, they have other things that they're also attending to, just as we all do. So give them a little bit of time and just consistently and gently follow up with them. Emily, next slide, please. All right, and then just a quick note about communications during Creative Advocacy Week. We are already publishing communications on our social media channels, and we're sending out emails to our entire email list advertising the different events that are happening during Advocacy Week. And we want to get the word out to as many people throughout the state as possible so that we can increase participation. And that requires everyone, including everyone in this room, to help us with that. So please do feel empowered to share our social media posts or to make your own if there's something going on in your community and you want to use your own pictures or your own content to bring attention to the events of this week. If you do that, I would just ask that you use the hashtag #CreateAdvocacy2024. Not a requirement, but just a humble ask. And the next thing, if you're planning on hosting an event near you, because again, we want this to be about all of us, and there's no reason why any one group or cohort of groups needs to hold all of the Advocacy Week events. We want people to feel empowered to take it upon themselves to celebrate this in whatever way makes sense. Just let us know that it's going on, and we will be happy to, in turn, help amplify the work that you are doing to help the sector. Expect to receive more emails and just more general communications from MASSCreative in the next week, so in the lead up to Advocacy Week, and then throughout Advocacy Week 2. And finally, continue to visit our landing page for Creative Sector Advocacy Week to find the registration form for the day at the State House, the registration forms or links to the registration forms for the other training that we're going to have on January 17th, helpful blogs about what nonprofit organizations can or can't do if they are advocating or lobbying, as well as downloadable social media graphics just to make it a little bit easier for you to help get the word out. And with that, I will pass it back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Kelsey and Richleen. I want to just sort of footnote a couple of things, which is if you are planning to come to advocacy, or sorry, if you're planning on coming to Creative Sector Day at the State House and you would like to have a meeting that day with your legislators, you will need to reach out now to make that ask. If you arrive, and that is something you can do, right? If you arrive at the State House and you do not have a confirmed meeting, you are welcome to professionally and respectfully drop off materials at your legislators' offices. But we want to respect the fact that the State House is a office building, right? There are people who are working really hard, who have schedules that are much like yours, and they can't necessarily fit in another meeting at the spur of the moment. You can absolutely drop by and say, hi, I just wanted to leave these materials for Rep. Keefe. We know what an amazing supporter of arts and culture she is, and we just want to thank her, or we want to make sure she's aware of this particular issue. Also, again, it's a working office, so we won't be holding performances in the hallways of the building or in offices themselves. So just some things to keep in mind as you are prepping for that week. If you want to have a meeting with your legislators on another day during that week, absolutely start asking now. Again, all of our schedules are busy, so we want to ask as soon as possible. So what asks can you make when you're in these meetings with legislators and elected officials? Well, first of all, there are lots of things you can ask for. And sometimes just sharing your story and saying, I want you to think more about how we can work together to advance arts and culture in your district is a great start. But if there's something specific that you want to talk about, this is the moment to talk with your elected officials about that. So we're going to talk about two sort of major areas that you can talk about with your state legislators during this week. First one is the fiscal year 25 budget, right? We'll get into that in a second. And then we can also talk about different bills that have been filed that will support the creative sector. So let's start with the fiscal year 25 budget. So if any of you have been following the reports that are coming out, state revenues are not meeting the forecasted amounts. Right, and they set budgets based on what those forecasted amounts are. So tax collection is just the numbers are like the money that's coming in isn't as much as it used to be. There's also we're in this moment, right? A lot of people have talked about it, the ARPA cliff, where for the last 3 years we've seen an enormous amount of money moving from the federal government to state and local government, and that money is stopping, right? We knew that was going to happen, but what it means is that this might be a really tough budget, and legislators are going to have to make difficult decisions about what they are going to invest in and pay for in fiscal year 25. Just as a little, also for a little context, the main way that the state invests in arts and culture is through the Mass Cultural Council budget. It is the single largest amount of state investment in the sector that we know of, and that we track really carefully and advocate for. So in the last couple of years, we've seen nice, steady, incremental increases. And so, you know, we're excited about that. You're excited about that. We're seeing how that makes a difference. But we need to be prepared that we're going to make an ask, but we might also have to defend the amount that we have. Because when these difficult decisions come up, we want to make sure they understand just how important it is to continue to invest and provide public investment in the creative sector. So our long-term strategy here and our long-term goal is to reach a $5 per capita amount of money to the Mass Cultural Council budget. That would be so that if you count every person in Massachusetts, every resident, there's $5 being spent by the state government through the Mass Cultural Council to ensure more equitable and inclusive arts and culture for the Commonwealth. We know that's not going to happen in 1 year because that would be about $35 million. As you saw in the previous slide, we have $10 million to go, but we've made nice steady progress. And we are thinking about how we can incrementally move forward on that. So the Mass Cultural Council recently submitted their formal request to Governor Healy, and they requested $28 million for fiscal year 25. And so that's what we're going to advocate for this year. One of the great things about the Mass Cultural Council is that they are very strong and supportive of listening and working with the creative advocates in the sector. And so this is what MASSCreative is going to mobilize and organize around, which is $28 million. We are also going to defend quite heartily that there not be a cut, right? So that's sort of where we are in this conversation. So if you have an opportunity to talk to your elected officials on the state level, the number is $28 million. Moving ahead, we also have the creative sector agenda, which if you've attended these calls before, you know that the creative sector agenda is 5 bills that were developed in partnership with all of you. So last November and December of actually 2022, we went out and we held a whole bunch of regional meetings. We had a survey where we asked for input, and thanks to all of the contributions, we developed these 5 bills that we worked with co-sponsors and champions in the State House to file that address real specific needs of the creative community. So we're going to go through them really quickly. The first one is the Creative Space Preservation Act. This is in response to the fact that we know that there is a historic and precipitous loss of space for people to make, create, rehearse, showcase, display, and perform art and culture across Massachusetts. And so this bill, which is a no money bill, that's a really great thing in a tough budget year, does 2 things. It creates a definition for what creative space means under preservation law, and it also will allow cities and towns to create trust funds that they can use year over year to specifically preserve and construct creative spaces. This is like a really important building block in a larger set of work that's about making sure that we have more creative space that's geographically and economically accessible for the creative workers in our sector. And again, this is a no money bill. So we're not asking for them to pay for it. We're asking them to set up conditions to make it so that it's easier to preserve and construct creative space. The next bill is the Cultural Equity and Tourism Bill. This bill would take a small percentage of funding that goes towards tourism funding and create a grant program that would support marketing and promotional efforts for arts and cultural organizations. We know that there is an enormous economic engine around regional, local, and global tourism to Massachusetts. And when we market our state, sometimes we don't tell the full story about what is available in the state and whose cultures and communities live and work in the state. And so this bill would work to address that by making sure when that tourism dollar arrives in Massachusetts, it is spread out and shared more equitably by making sure that organizations and programs that amplify the stories of historically marginalized or underrepresented cultures are promoted and have the resources they need to promote themselves, right? Okay, next up is the ACE Act. This would create a grant program specifically for creative sector businesses and organizations to support efforts, whether it's physical, like changes to their buildings, or programmatic changes or programmatic additions that reduce barriers encountered by people with disabilities. There's a great study that was put out by Open Door Arts. Shout out to Open Door Arts. They're an unbelievable organization, and you should all check them out. But they basically, in partnership with the Mass Cultural Council, took a look and said, and surveyed cultural organizations, and cultural organizations said, yeah, we know exactly what we need to do with our spaces and with our programs to make sure that they are more inviting and more accessible by individuals who have a disability, but we don't have the money to pay for that. And so that this act would create that fund that would start to address that. We also have the Place Act. This is a major revision of a public art bill that many of you know we've worked on in past legislative years. It would create a statewide fund to commission and maintain public art. That fund is funded through a small percentage of all of the budgets of building projects for state buildings in Massachusetts. So if the legislature, or excuse me, if the state's going to build a new office for the Lottery Commission, a small percentage of that money needs to be held to commission and create and install public art that would be on or in that building complex. It would require local input, right? So that we're not just dropping pieces of public art that have no relationship to the communities in which that public art is, in the design and the focus of the public art. And this public art and installations would be on or in public state-owned properties. So it's not saying that every developer has to include public art in the design of their spaces. It's not saying that every homeowner has to. It's just when the state builds things, public art is considered and is part of that plan. Finally, the Downtown Vitality Act. This is one that we are working with a large coalition on. It would take 5% of sales tax that's collected from online purchases to create a fund, and that fund would support downtown management entities, which is a very fancy way of saying all of the cultural districts in Massachusetts are technically downtown management entities. We know the amazing work that those cultural districts do to unite and do placekeeping and placemaking. And this would provide funding to make sure that those cultural districts, those business improvement districts, Main Street associations have the resources they need to continue to grow their work, right? And to scale up the economic impact that work is already doing. This bill right now prioritizes efforts that are happening and programs that are happening in gateway cities and other low-income communities, including rural communities. So they're really, one of the things that's really important to MASSCreative is that anytime we're working on a piece of legislation, we are considering how is it going to move us forward towards a more just, anti-racist, equitable, and inclusive Massachusetts. And so this is part of that too. So that was a very quick whirlwind through the creative sector advocacy agenda. In addition to those bills, there are other bills being considered primarily by the Committee for Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development. And you can look up on the Massachusetts legislative website to see all the bills that are being considered. Some of those bills may be ones that you or your organization feel very passionately about. If you have questions about a piece of legislation that's currently under review, we are happy to talk it through with you. MASSCreative, as a rule, does not take a position on all the bills. The ones that we have taken a supportive position on are the ones that we just talked about. And then when we're talking about, so those are things that you can talk about with your state decision makers. When we're talking about local decision makers, it's important to remember that the majority of funding, the vast majority of funding of our schools comes from local property taxes. And so the folks who are making decisions, depending on the makeup of your city or town, are mostly the superintendent of schools, the school committee, the mayor or select board or town manager. There we go. And so when we're talking about how a city or town is making sure that every child has quality in-school arts education, we need to make sure that we're talking with local decision makers to say this is a top priority for us. And you can talk about the great work that you're already seeing happening in your community. I know many communities across Massachusetts are facing some pretty dire local budgets as well. And so really making sure that they are not cutting funding for arts activities and arts education in schools is really important. Again, if you're looking locally, there are a plethora of other issues that affect the creative community that are under the discretion of local government. And if there's something in specifically that's happening in your community that you'd like to talk more about, let us know and we can help point you in the direction of some possible asks that you can make. Okay, so now let's have a discussion in the 10 minutes we have left. We've thrown a lot of information at you, but we hope that this is at least the beginning. This helps sort of give you a starting place, which is sign up to join us for Creative Sector Day at the State House. Consider making a meeting in your district with your elected decision makers. Consider organizing your creative community. Sometimes that's actually the best thing to do before you even go talk and make an ask to an elected official, is to just sit down and make sure that you are working in solidarity and in community with the folks to sit within your community to say, what do we need as a creative community and a sector, and who can give it to us? And then making sure that you are thinking about how you're going to talk collaboratively about the impact of the work that you are already doing. So, and then as Kelsey said, amplify, share, recruit, right? We know that when we are all talking in a united space, we get more seriously considered by elected decision makers. That doesn't mean that we all have to ask for the same thing, but we are all talking about the value and contributions that the creative sector makes to the lives of people who live and visit Massachusetts, and that it takes an entire full ecosystem that includes individuals, nonprofit organizations, creative businesses, arts service organizations to make that happen, right? Okay, so I'm going to open up the chat, but in the meantime, okay, I'm seeing, it looks, Kelsey and Richleen, thank you so much for answering questions as we go. Sarah, you asked a really good question about should you reach out to your reps based on where you live or where your work is located? So you as a constituent are placing one vote, and that is going to be where you live, right? So if you are interested, and so that's you're the constituent that your elected official cares most about, right? So if you have the opportunity to engage, that's great. If you represent a cultural organization or a creative business that is located somewhere else, you should also reach out to those reps or senators. And one of the things I would heartily encourage you bringing with you to that conversation is some sort of data around the number of folks who are served in that elected official's district by your organization, right? Because organizations don't cast votes, but people who attend your organization do, and support your organization and value your organization. So unfortunately, Sarah, the answer is both, but don't do it alone, right? You've got other staff, you've got other coworkers, you can think about doing that. Okay. I'm going quickly through and seeing. Okay, Margot, thank you for sharing something that we just did not talk about in this presentation, but is really important. So right, I talked about we're going to have breakfast in the morning on State House Day, then we're going to have a formal program. And then for the rest of the day in the Great Hall, and some of you, if you've been to the State House, know that's the space that has like all the flags like hung up of every city and town in Massachusetts. And then on the grand staircase is a beautiful marble staircase that is literally right in front of that Great Hall. We are going to have rotating performances and exhibits happening in those spaces for the rest of the day until 3 o'clock. This is something that we've never done before. So this is really exciting, right? We are like filling the building with joy and creativity and vibrancy and love, right? So we have put out a call, right? Because we're not just going to pick, we want to make sure that there's a really diverse group of people who are performing and presenting at that on that day. And so we are really thinking about ensuring that there is full geographic representation of our Commonwealth. And so to that end, and I think this isn't a surprise, right? Already we've received a lot. We've received over 100 requests to perform or to exhibit, which is so exciting. A lot of those are coming from the city of Boston, which is great. And obviously we understand most convenient for those folks to travel to the State House. But we do want to make sure that we have artists and creatives and humanists and culture bearers that are from across the Commonwealth. So if you are from an area that is not the city of Boston or greater Boston, and you think, oh, I'm sure my favorite artist has already submitted a request to perform, don't assume that, and please encourage and share out this call for art. Every artist or artist group or exhibitor or exhibit group will receive $450. Okay, Toki is asking, do we have access to a database to identify cultural organizations and creative businesses in a given area as we want to organize a larger meeting? Yes, reach out to us. We will help. We can start. We know we have MASSCreative's Action Network has organizational and individual members from across the Commonwealth, and we can sort some of that information and get that back to you. And then we can also, that may just be a great starting place, but we're happy to help with that. All right. I think I've made my way through all the chats, but do other folks have other questions that they'd like to ask in real time, or they say we did not actually answer in the chat? I'm not seeing any hands raised or mics turned off. I want to lift up. Oh, Catherine, you do. Cat.
Hi,
Hey.
can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm working with, the audio is on the Zoom meeting on my phone and the video's on my laptop. I don't know what happened to my audio on my laptop. So I just wanted to make sure everyone could hear me. I had a question. So I'm a new arts advocacy nonprofit, and I'm trying to, of course, create awareness. And I think if it's possible, could something like a nonprofit exhibit information about their outreach to the community at this event?
You are more than welcome to submit, and we will absolutely, we're going to select groups to exhibit and perform, but yes, absolutely. You don't have to, we want to share the full breadth and depth of the creative community. Thanks, Kathy. Kathy, you also asked a really, really great question, which I think is important to highlight here, which is what dates do the bills move out of committee? So as we've talked about on previous Zooms, our legislative session is 2 years. The first year is mostly about filing those bills, building support, and holding hearings for all of those bills. This session, the House and the Senate have agreed that by February 7th, all committees have to make decisions about the bills that they are considering, and every bill that's filed is considered by one of the committees. So what do we want to have happen with the creative sector agenda bills, those 5 bills? We want to see them all reported favorably out of committee. And many of you have already joined us for hearings that those committees, the various committees have held that are considering those bills, and asked for those bills to be reported out favorably. If they receive an extension or a study order, that means they're done for the session. That's like the nicest, most polite way to say no, thank you. And rarely, if ever, does a bill get reported negatively. They just don't want to say no. They want to say not right now, which is basically saying no. So, one of the things that we are working on, and that one of the reasons we scheduled advocacy week for ahead, is so that we are able to apply some really important support for the creative sector agenda and for the bills that we care about getting moved out of committee ahead of that February 7th deadline. So in your conversations, if you happen to have the chair, if your legislator is the chair of one of the committees considering the bill, you could also make that ask and say, I really encourage you and the committee to report this bill favorably out of committee, right? Okay, Catherine, do you have another?
I did have one other question. So for me personally, I had a a work hiatus during all of this time when these bills are being created. And they affect these bills and what they're proposing affect me very much. So, you know, I'm kind of playing catch up. And I've actually started reaching out to my legislators about this. Do we still have time for public comment from, like, for instance, the members of my organization? Do they have, is there still time for them to write and comment on these before the 7th?
Yes, thus far, we've all the committees that are considering bills in the creative sector agenda have not closed written testimony. And so if you go on the Massachusetts Legislative website, which is really fantastic, you look up the bill, you're going to see that bill. You'll see in like the bill's history that this bill got a hearing. Click on that and there'll be information about how you can submit written testimony. You can also join if there's 1 or 2 or 3 bills that you feel particularly passionate about. You can endorse it on our website. And then we have instructions about including templates about submitting written testimony for those bills. And we'll be sharing out more information about joint asks that those coalitions will be making in support of that specific legislation.
Okay.
You are so welcome. So we are at time. We are going to hold another training and, huddle regarding the Creative Advocacy Week on team. It's on the 17th, right? Okay, great. We are going to have a guest speaker who's going to talk to us a little bit more about engaging with elected decision makers. We'll probably have updates to share with you about some of this work. So I promise it will not be a complete repeat. So what I would say, if you're walking out the door right now, the big to-dos are, if you want a meeting, reach out and ask for that meeting ASAP. If you want to join us for State House Day, register today. If you want to perform or present during State House Day, submit your request to present. We won't be able to take everyone, but we'll take as many as we can. And then amplify. Make sure that you are bringing, what is it? It's the Prel commercial, like you tell 3 friends, they tell 3 friends, and they tell 3 friends, just to really date myself, but do that. Bring a buddy, bring some friends, as Richland pointed out. And as always, the MASSCreative team is here to provide you more specific resources or answer any specific questions. Just email us. We will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much. We are so glad to be in community with all of you. This has been fantastic.